I hope, this conversation is too compelling, I think, to cut it off at this segment, which is we're coming up on break. Would you mind sticking around for another 10 minutes after that?
I have no problem sticking around. No problem at all.
Well, Howard, I have one last question before we go to break, and then I know some of my colleagues here in the studio have some questions for you. But because we may not be able to change, unfortunately, some of the horrible racial residue and legacy in this country in terms of perceptions directly, or we may not be able to accommodate people's fears. It seems like we can make policy changes, though, in terms of how the law views these issues. What are you and many members of the community, perhaps of Howard University alumni and other activists within the African American community, what are you pinning your hopes on as next steps for action, whether it's about Zimmerman directly or the broader issue of criminal justice reform in this country?
Well, I think what we have to do, and specifically with Zimmerman, the verdict is the verdict, and we have to live with the verdict, and we don't have to move on in the sense of it's over, let's pack our bags and go, but we do have to live with that verdict, and we have to move on from that verdict. Then we have to sit down and say, okay, what is next to make sure that this doesn't happen again, because what has already happened has happened. It happened, and I know a lot of people are asking for civil rights charges, and I don't really see that happening, because you have to prove that he actually killed Trayvon because of his race. They can prove that he followed Trayvon because of his race, but they can't prove that that's the reason he killed him, right? So I think that's tough. So what are we going to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Do we need to have some far-reaching profiling law implemented, that if you just profile someone and it can be proved that you profiled, that's a crime? If it can be proved, for example, with the Zimmerman case, if it could be proved that his 911 call was profiling, that could be a crime within itself. Do we need those type of laws? And then also, do we need to look, like you said, I like what you said earlier when you said that even though Zimmerman didn't use Stand Your Ground created a culture that allowed him to walk free. And those jurors knew of that culture. It's Florida. They know the culture. They know to stand your ground. So even though he didn't invoke it, the jurors, I'm sure, still thought of that. So do we need to revamp those laws to where we make sure that if someone created a circumstance that they aren't able to claim stand your ground?
That's such a great point, and I think that there are a lot of things that we can do in that regard, and we'll continue the discussion about that with Howard Kanze, our Activist of the Week. He's an alumnus of the Howard University School of Law. He's an entertainment lawyer based in New York City, now speaking to us from his hometown of Natchitoches, Louisiana, and one of the original activists who led to the arrest of George Zimmerman. We're continuing our conversation after this break when Take Action News continues after this.